Welcome back to If you love motorcycles that break the rules, defy convention, and bring raw, unfiltered power to the dirt, then you're in the right place. Here, we dive into the most exciting machines from the world of motorcycling. And today's feature is something truly wild. We're talking about the 2026 Maico 501, a bike that refuses to conform, that spits in the face of electronic assists and says, let the rider handle it. If you thought modern bikes were getting too tame, this beast is your antidote. Let's get into it. Let's start with some context. Maico isn't your average motorcycle brand. It has a long and storied past, especially in the world of motocross. Originally founded in Germany in the 1920s, Maico made a name for itself in the 70s and 80s with motocross and enduro bikes that had one thing in common: insane power. The original 490 Maico, in particular, has gained legendary status for being one of the most powerful and unmanageable two-stroke dirt bikes ever made. Fast forward to today, and Maico still follows that old-school formula: big displacement, two-stroke engines, minimal electronics, and a commitment to pure, raw performance. And in 2026, the Maico 501 might just be the most Maico thing Maico has ever made. The engine produces a staggering amount of horsepower. Official figures are hard to pin down. Maico doesn't publish factory dyno sheets, but estimates put it well north of 60 horsepower, and possibly even more depending on tuning. And in a bike that weighs under 250 pounds, that power-to-weight ratio is absolutely wild. But it's not just the peak horsepower. It's how that power hits. A two-stroke engine delivers power in a very sudden, explosive way, especially at higher RPMs. There's no traction control, no ride-by-wire, and no rider modes. Twist the throttle, and you'd better be ready to hang on. The exhaust note is another thing entirely. If you've ever heard a big-bore two-stroke in person, you know what I mean. It doesn't purr, it doesn't growl, it barks, crackles, and screams. The 501 sounds like it's angry at the world, and it probably is. It's mechanical chaos, and that's exactly the point. Now let's talk about the chassis. The 2026 Maico 501 uses a steel tube frame that's built for strength and flexibility. It's not the lightest or most high-tech frame on the market, but it has proven over decades to be extremely resilient, and in the hands of an experienced rider, it can feel incredibly planted. Suspension comes from either WP or Öhlins, depending on configuration. You can spec your Maico 501 to a surprising degree, since these bikes are essentially hand-assembled to order. That means if you're racing motocross, you can get a track-specific setup. If you're riding enduro, they'll dial it in for off-road and trails. But regardless of setup, this suspension isn't there to coddle you. It's there to handle jumps, ruts, and terrain at race speeds. Let's take a second to talk about how the 501 feels when you're riding it. It's hard to describe unless you've actually thrown a leg over one, but imagine this. The moment you kick it over, it roars to life with a violent, explosive sound. You can feel the engine through the bars and pegs like it's a living thing. And when you crack the throttle, there's an almost instantaneous surge of torque that tries to lift the front end. There's no electronic intervention, no safety net. It's just you, the throttle, and your ability to manage a whole lot of power. It demands respect, and if you treat it casually, it will bite back. That might scare off casual riders, but for the hardcore enthusiast, that's what makes the 501 special. It's a reminder of what motorcycling used to be: dangerous, thrilling, and incredibly alive. Another aspect that sets the Maico 501 apart is how customizable it is. Since these bikes are essentially hand-built, you can tailor almost every aspect to your preferences: suspension, gearing, carb setup, exhaust, even the tank and plastics. This makes every 501 slightly different, depending on who's riding it and what they need. That's a level of personalization you just don't get from major manufacturers anymore. And while the price reflects that, we're talking $15,000 or more, depending on spec, you're not just buying a bike. You're buying an experience. A machine that was made for you, not for the mass market. The reason why we don't see more bikes like the 501 in 2026 is pretty simple: environmental standards. Two-strokes are notorious for their emissions, and big displacement ones are especially problematic. That's why major manufacturers have long abandoned them in favor of four-strokes or electric power. But Maico operates in a very different space. Since these bikes are limited production, often considered competition use only, and not road legal in most regions, they avoid some of the regulatory hurdles. That means they can still build a 501 cubic centimeters two-stroke without having to strangle it with emissions equipment or neuter it with electronics. In short, they exist in a gray area, and that's part of their appeal. This bike is not for beginners. It's not even for intermediate riders. The 501 is made for experienced riders who know what they're getting into, riders who appreciate the challenge of taming an unruly machine, and who understand the importance of throttle control, body positioning, and mental focus. It's also for collectors and connoisseurs, people who want a piece of history that still lives and breathes. A Maico isn't something you just buy off the showroom floor. You wait for it. You spec it out. You make it yours. And when it arrives, you don't just ride it, you. In a world where bikes are getting more refined, more digital, and more safe, the 501 stands in stark contrast. It's a relic from another era, somehow still alive in ours. And yet, despite its old-school character, it still feels relevant. Maybe even more relevant than ever, because it reminds us of what we've lost in the race for efficiency and control. Let's be real, most riders will never need a Maico 501. Most tracks don't require that kind of power. Most people don't want a bike that can throw them off if they sneeze at the throttle. But that's not the point. The 501 exists not because it makes sense, but because it doesn't. It exists because some riders don't want easy. They want real, raw, unfiltered. And that's exactly what the Maico 501 delivers. There are few motorcycles left that can truly be called analog experiences. The 2026 Maico 501 is one of them. It's a throwback, a rebel, and a legend reborn. For those lucky enough or brave enough to ride one, it's an experience that sticks with you forever. The 2026 Maico 501 is a bike that's completely out of step with the times, and that's exactly why it's so important. In an industry that's constantly chasing more tech, more safety, and more mass appeal, the 501 says, no thanks. It's not trying to be modern. It's trying to be authentic. If you're the kind of rider who wants to feel every bump, hear every explosion in the combustion chamber, and ride a machine that demands your full attention, the Maico 501 might just be your dream bike. Thanks for hanging out with us today and diving into the wild world of the Maico 501. If you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into legendary bikes, both old and new. Got questions, thoughts, or experiences with a Maico? Drop them in the comments below. We love hearing from fellow riders.